When our little girl was born, we got a Subaru. It's where she said her first word,
No.
saw her first day of school,
Bye-bye.
made a best friend forever.
Oh my.
The back seat of my Subaru is where she grew up.
What?
The 2015 Subaru Forester.
What?
Built to be there for your family. Love, it's what makes a Subaru a Subaru.
University Subaru.
The wise choice.
Good morning and welcome to Radio Friends on this Christmas Eve. So can we be the first to say Merry Christmas to you early? We've got Larry Brown with us. Good to have you here, Larry. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas Eve.
Yeah. I know you don't have your guitar today.
No, got it.
No guitar. You're not going to sing, and you do have your voice this time.
Yes, I have a voice.
Last time you were on, what was it, for Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving, yes,
I felt so bad for you. To show you what a pro Larry is.
Yeah.
He came in here and he was going to tell that story, and the voice was going out, but you told the story.
But
All right. So we have a Christmas Eve story today?
we do.
All right. So without further ado, here's Larry Brown with a Christmas Eve story.
Wilbur came in out of the cold, shook himself off, got in line for the meal they were serving at the soup kitchen. And right away, folks were stepping up and saying, "Boy, it's going to get cold tonight. What are you going to do tonight?" Wilbur says, "Nah, not a problem for me, not a problem." He stepped up to the line to get his food, and Penny, one of the workers of the shelter, gave him a wonderful Christmas Eve meal. It was turkey and all that, and Wilbur was delighted. But the first thing she said was, "It's pretty cold tonight. I know the shelter's going to fill up, but we've got that new auditorium for folks to spend the night. You better come in." "No, I'm okay," Wilbur said. Wilbur went into the corner, sat down with his friends that he usually talks with, and of course they were saying, "Gonna get cold tonight. What are you gonna do, Wilbur?" And Wilbur said, "For 14 years I've taken care of myself." Now, Wilbur had made himself a little tent up north, about a couple of miles north of the shelter and of the soup kitchen. He'd been under the bridge for a while, and the police had encouraged him not to do that. He'd been in a hobo camp for a while, but he finally found a place by himself, kind of up Wolf Creek and down a little gully and out of the way, and he was doing fine. Made himself some tarps and had several blankets, and he'd do fine. Well, when he left the soup kitchen, the van had pulled up to take folks to the new place where they were offering shelter for the night. And he refused, says, "I'm doing fine." Headed on up north. There was a couple of inches of snow, and the wind was blowing, and it was slow going. As he went through the community, he noticed the Christmas lights and noticed that traffic was beginning to die down. And as he got to the little business district that he went through, things were shutting down. And he crossed what he believed was the coldest place on his trek back to his house. That was the bridge across the interstate. Wilbur said, "Wind never stops blowing there." Another mile or so, got to his little shelter and hunkered in, pulled his blankets around him, and sometime in the night, Wilbur had looked at his watch, as a matter of fact, and it was about 1 o'clock. There was a scratching outside on the tarp of his tent. Wilbur thought, "Oh, those raccoons, they're trying to get in again." But this time it scratched, and a voice said, "Mister, I'm cold. Can I come in?" It was a child's voice. Wilbur opened the flap, and there was a kid standing there with a coat, but no gloves, and shivering. A kid that couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Wilbur says, "What are you doing here, kid? You should be at home." "I haven't got no home, mister. Can I come in? I'm cold." "You need to be..." But Wilbur couldn't turn him around. "Oh, come in here." Next thing you know, Wilbur kind of got him down amongst his blankets, and Wilbur was feeling that little kid shiver up next to him, and finally Wilbur says, "Oh, we got to get you to a shelter. It's getting too cold. Come on, kid." And he kind of drugged the kid out and took one of his blankets and wrapped it around the kid and said, "We're going to go up to the shelter. It's a couple miles, but you can do it." Well, by the time they headed out of his little tent, the snow was now about 2 or 3 inches, and as they struggled up the hill and finally got to the street, it was slow going, and the kid kept dropping behind a little bit. Well, they got to the bridge across the interstate. Wilbur said, "This is the coldest place in town. Wind never stops blowing." And the kid was shivering and stumbling, and by the time they got over the bridge, Wilbur said, "All right, kid," and just turned around and picked him up, wrapped him up in the blanket, and started carrying him. He kept saying to the kid, "It's not far now." As they went through that little business district, everything was closed. None of the places that often stay open all night were not there. No place to get warm on the way. Well, he went over beside one building for a while and held the kid tight in the blanket, and Wilbur got his breath and they headed on, slower going. Well, the snow was beginning to taper off a little bit. Stars were coming out, but that just meant it was getting colder. And finally, after it seemed all night, Wilbur got to the shelter, carried that kid up the steps, and just knocked on the door. The lights came on, and it was Pete, one of the workers at the shelter, said, "Wilbur, get in here. What are you doing? Get in here." Wilbur said, I'm all right, and take this kid. Wilbur just sort of handed the kid off to Pete, and Wilbur just sort of collapsed there and up against the wall down by the couch and went to sleep. Well, the next morning, Wilbur woke up. He could smell coffee and breakfast. And Penny, the worker, came over and said, "Wilbur, I'm so glad you came in last night. It got to 10 below zero. I'm glad you came in. We got breakfast going." Wilbur kind of stirred and said, "What about the kid?" Penny says, I don't know, Wilbur. I'll get Pete." Well, Pete came in, and by that time Wilbur stood up, and Pete said, "You had a question, Wilbur?" Wilbur said, "Where's the kid? The kid I brought in." Pete said, "Well, Wilbur, when you came in last night, and I'm so glad you came in. It was so cold. You mumbled something, just handed me a wad of blankets, but wasn't any kid." Well, Pete said, "Wilbur, you've been drinking?" "No, sir." "Well, never mind." Pete says, "All right, get yourself some breakfast." Pete went off, and as Wilbur stood up and looked around, of course, the living room floor was covered by guys sleeping and now beginning to wake up. Breakfast was in the air, and Wilbur looked off to the other side of the room, and there was the Christmas tree, and beside it was a nativity scene with rather large statues of the shepherds and Mary and Joseph, and there was a manger with a baby Jesus. And Wilbur looked over, and for just a moment he thought he saw that little baby turn its head and smile and wink. Wilbur rubbed his eyes and looked again and thought, "Oh, I know. I didn't take the kid to the shelter. That child led me to the shelter."
What a beautiful story.
The Christmas child.
What a beautiful story, Larry. I didn't know where that story was going until the very end. And is that yours?
Oh, yes, just
that's
composed
very
that for this year. So,
Okay. If people want to hear more of your stories, they're available on DVD and CD.
yes.
Right? How can they get it?
You can contact me at my website, brownstory.com, or contact me at brownstory@hotmail.com.
Okay. Thank you so much, Larry. You've become a tradition. You and Kathy and Dave become a tradition with us on
They're going to be
radio.
on tomorrow.
Yeah, they're going to be on
Christmas Day.
tomorrow on Christmas Day. I hope that you and your family and all of your loved ones have a very special Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
We will. You
And we
too.
thank you for your friendship and being a part of Radio Friends again this year.
All right.
All right. Merry Christmas to you, Larry.
Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to all of you. If you're going to be driving today, please be careful. We want you back with us tomorrow. As we said, tomorrow, Christmas Day, Kathy Barton and Dave Parra will be with us. Our program directed by Travis McMillan, Reynolds Journalism Institute. Audio is Pat Akers from KBIA. Our floor director is Lowell Thomas. And our assistant producer and guest coordinator, Uncle James Mauser. Out on the road today, please be careful. We'll see you tomorrow.